It ruins my aesthetic, Claire. Seriously? My sister Brianna held the vintage silver locket by its chain like it was contaminated. We were standing in the center of her Malibu launch party, surrounded by cameras and sparkling champagne. Inside that tarnished silver case was the last photo taken of our mother before she got sick. I never got the chance to explain. Brianna laughed, a sharp, cruel sound, and dropped the heirloom into the recycling bin next to her. Next time, bring something that doesn't smell like a thrift store. Her influencer friends giggled. I didn't cry. Tears represent a loss of control, and I wasn't losing control. I was calculating. I just stared at that bin. And for the first time in 5 years, the fog lifted. Drop a comment below and tell me what is one gift you gave from the heart that someone completely disrespected. I read every single story. I walked past the bar, past the hired DJ spinning tracks that cost $500 an hour, and stepped out onto the wide, limestone balcony. The heavy glass door slid shut, cutting off the noise instantly. Out here, the Malibu air was salty and cold. It cleared my head. It reminded me of who I actually was. Inside that room, Brianna saw a struggling freelance graphic designer who wore thrifted clothes because she couldn't afford better. She saw a sister who needed to be tolerated, mocked, and occasionally used as a prop for her charity content. But Brianna didn't know who was standing on this balcony. She didn't know that the freelance portfolio was a shell. She didn't know that 3 years ago, I founded Vertitech, a green energy firm that was currently closing contracts with 3 major European cities. She didn't know that while she was busy curating her Instagram feed, I was managing a corporation with 200 employees. I leaned against the railing and looked back at the party. I didn't see guests. I saw a balance sheet. And for the first time, I let myself audit the books. The villa she was standing in, with its panoramic ocean views, it cost $600,000. Technically, it was owned by the Hayes Family Trust. Brianna thought the trust was an inheritance from a distant great-aunt. It wasn't. I funded that trust every single month. The Porsche Taycan parked in the driveway, the one she captioned, "New whip. Hard work pays off?" That was leased through one of my holding companies under a generic fleet agreement. I paid the insurance. I paid the maintenance. I even paid the detailing fees she racked up every week. And then there was the angel investor. The mysterious, benevolent backer who believed in her vision and deposited $36,000 into her business account on the first of every month. That wasn't an angel. That was me. I closed my eyes and let the ocean wind hit my face. Why? That was the question everyone would ask. Why would a CEO let herself be treated like a beggar by a sister who brought nothing to the table but cruelty? It wasn't weakness. It was a promise. 5 years ago, sitting in a sterile hospital room, watching the machines breathe for our father after our mother had already passed, I made a vow. Take care of Brianna. She's fragile. She needs you. That promise became an invisible chain wrapped around my throat. For 5 years, I told myself that funding her lifestyle was the only way to keep my parents alive. I thought that if I stopped, I would be failing them. I turned my grief into a currency, and I let Brianna spend it. I convinced myself that her happiness was the receipt for my loyalty to the dead. I looked down at my hands. They were empty. The silver locket was gone. That locket wasn't just jewelry. It was the symbol of that promise. It was the anchor. And 10 minutes ago, Brianna hadn't just thrown away a piece of silver. She had thrown away the contract. She had looked at the memory of our mother and called it trash. The chain didn't break. She unlocked it herself. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen glowed in the darkness. I didn't call a taxi. I opened my secure email app and drafted a message to Sarah, my chief financial officer. The subject line was 2 words: Project Reality. I wasn't a sister anymore. Tonight, I was the bank. And the bank was foreclosing. I put my phone away just as the glass door slid open again. Brianna walked out, but she wasn't alone. She had her squad, 2 other influencers holding ring lights and a cameraman filming her every move. "Claire, there you are." Her voice was high, performative. We're doing a quick live stream about gratitude and hustle, and I need you to hold the reflector. The lighting out here is tricky." She didn't ask. She commanded. I stood still, my hands resting on the railing. "No," I said. The word felt heavy and solid, like a stone hitting water. Brianna blinked, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second before she recovered for the camera. "Ah, she's shy. Claire is camera shy because she hasn't quite found her footing yet. But that's okay. We support everyone on their journey, right guys?" She turned to her phone, speaking directly to her followers. "Claire is actually a perfect example of why you have to stay hungry. She's been trying to get her freelance graphic design thing off the ground for years. It's a struggle, but hey, not everyone has the hustle gene." The cameraman zoomed in on my thrifted cardigan. I saw the comments scrolling on her screen. "Does she need a GoFundMe?" Yikes, awkward. "Love your fit though, Brie." My brother-in-law, Daniel, stepped out onto the balcony then. He looked tired. He was holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres that Brianna had probably ordered him to pass around. He saw the camera, saw my face, and set the tray down on a side table. "Brianna, maybe we should cut the stream," Daniel said, his voice low. "Let's just enjoy the party." "Don't be a buzzkill, Danny," she snapped, not looking away from her phone. "We're manifesting. Actually, that's the big announcement." She turned back to me, her eyes gleaming with a manic kind of triumph. "Claire, you'll appreciate this. I'm in talks with a major conglomerate, global. They want to buy the brand." I stayed silent. $5 million, she whispered, leaning in so the microphone would catch it. "I built this empire from nothing. Zero help. Just my vision and my grind. And once the deal closes, well, things are going to change." She straightened up, looking down at me with a smirk that wasn't for the camera. "I'm going to be really rich, Claire. Like real money. And I think it's time you learned to stand on your own 2 feet. No more charity." Charity. The word hung in the damp air. She thought the occasional dinner she paid for with my money was charity. She thought letting me hold a reflector was charity. "You're selling the company?" I asked, my voice calm. "Letter of intent is signed," she bragged. "We close next week." I looked at Daniel. He was staring at his shoes, shame radiating off him in waves. He knew. Or at least, he suspected. "That's impressive," I said. "Selling a company you built from scratch." "Self-made," she corrected, flipping her hair. "That's the hashtag. Number self-made." She turned back to her phone, laughing at a comment. "Okay, guys, we're going back inside to pop some real bottles. Claire, you can stay out here if you want. Try not to mope. It ruins the vibe." She swept back inside, her entourage trailing behind her like a comet's tail. Daniel lingered for a moment. "Claire," he started. Go inside, Daniel," I said. He nodded once and followed his wife. I stood alone on the balcony. $5 million. She was selling a company she didn't own. She was selling intellectual property registered to my holding company. She was selling inventory paid for by my accounts. She wasn't just a brat anymore. She was a liability. She was committing corporate fraud on a live stream. I looked at the closed glass door. The party inside was a blur of light and motion, a silent movie of excess. I didn't feel angry. I felt clinical. I pulled my phone out again. I didn't call a ride. I opened my banking app. Transfer to angel investor account. Cancelled. Recurring transfer. Cancelled. Scheduled transfer. Cancelled. Then I opened my calendar. Monday morning, 9 a.m. Meeting with legal. Self-made, I whispered to the empty ocean. Monday, we would see who actually made what. I walked back into the party, moving through the crowd like a ghost. No one looked at me. They were too busy posing for photos, too busy chasing the light. I walked straight to the recycling bin near the bar. I didn't care who saw. I reached in and pulled the silver locket out from under a pile of empty champagne bottles. It was sticky with spilled alcohol. I wiped it on my sleeve, feeling the cold metal against my palm. It felt heavy, like a heart that had stopped beating. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look for Daniel. I walked out the front door, past the valet who looked right through me, and walked down the block to where I'd parked my 10-year-old sedan. The drive to the city was silent. I didn't turn on the radio. I needed the quiet. I needed to think in straight lines and hard numbers. 40 minutes later, I pulled into the underground garage of the Verditech headquarters. The security guard, Mike, straightened up as I approached the gate. He didn't see a freelancer in thrifted clothes. He saw the CEO. "Evening, Miss Hayes," he said, buzzing me in. "Evening, Mike." The elevator ride to the top floor was smooth, a silent ascent into the world I actually lived in. When the doors opened, the lights were already on in the executive conference room. Sarah was waiting. Sarah was my CFO, but she was also the only person who knew the full extent of the arrangement. She had the binder open on the glass table. It was labeled Project Reality. We had drafted it 2 years ago as a contingency plan, a break in case of emergency protocol. I never thought I'd use it. "You initiated the bank freeze from your phone," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. She was looking at her tablet. "Transfer canceled. Recurring payments terminated. It's done," I said, dropping my bag on the chair. "She tried to sell the company, Sarah." Sarah looked up, her glasses reflecting the city lights. "She what?" "She signed a letter of intent. She's selling the brand to a conglomerate. $5 million. Sarah let out a short, sharp breath. "She's selling intellectual property she doesn't own. She's selling inventory she hasn't paid for. That's not just a breach of contract, Claire. That's fraud." "We'll get to the legalities tomorrow," I said, walking to the head of the table. "Right now, I want to sever the physical ties. What do we have?" Sarah slid 3 documents across the polished glass. "First," she said, tapping the top page. "The villa. It's held by the trust. The lease agreement states that tenancy is at the discretion of the trustee. That's you. We can issue a 30-day notice to vacate, or we can file for immediate eviction based on unauthorized commercial use. That party she's throwing right now violates the residential zoning clause." "Immediate," I said. "File it." "Second," Sarah continued, sliding the next paper forward. "The Porsche. The lease is under Verditech Fleet Services. It's assigned to her as a company consultant. Since she is not an employee and provides no consulting services, we are recalling the vehicle. If she refuses to return it within 24 hours, we report it as stolen. Report it as unauthorized use effective immediately," I corrected. "Disable the remote access." "Done," Sarah said. She pushed the final document forward. "And the credit cards. The angel investor corporate cards she carries. They have a combined limit of $50,000. "Cut them," I said. "All of them." I picked up the pen. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen, a gift from our father when I graduated business school. He had told me to use it to build things. Tonight, I was using it to tear something down. The room was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning. I didn't feel the grief I expected. I felt the cold, hard satisfaction of balancing an equation that had been uneven for 5 years. I signed the eviction notice. Scratch. I signed the vehicle recall. Scratch. I signed the credit termination. Scratch. The sound of the pen on the paper was loud in the empty room. It sounded like a lock clicking shut. "Project Reality is active," Sarah said, gathering the papers. "I'll have the courier run these first thing in the morning." "No," I said, standing up. "Have legal prep the cease and desist for the sale. If she thinks she's selling my company, she's in for a shock." I walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, in Malibu, the music was still playing. Brianna was still popping bottles, celebrating a fortune that didn't exist, in a house she didn't own, driving a car she couldn't keep. The party was over. She just didn't know it yet. The next morning, the sun hadn't even touched the skyline when the legal brief landed on my desk. It was thick, bound in a heavy folder, and stamped with the seal of my company's external counsel. Sarah sat across from me, looking pale. She had been up all night with the audit team. "You need to read page 4, she said, her voice tight. "It's worse than we thought." I flipped the document open. It was a copy of the letter of intent Brianna had signed with the conglomerate. I scanned the legalese until my eyes landed on the section Sarah had flagged. Asset Declaration. There, in black and white, Brianna had listed the intellectual property of the brand, the logo, the trademarked slogans, the proprietary fabric blends as her own. She had listed the current inventory, valued at $200,000, as fully owned assets. She didn't own any of it. 3 years ago, when she started the business, I had registered every single trademark under Vertitech Holdings to protect her from liability. I had paid for every stitch of inventory directly from the holding company accounts. Legally, Brianna didn't own a business. She was, on paper, a glorified brand ambassador with zero equity. But the fraud didn't stop at the intellectual property. I turned the page to the financials section. My breath caught in my throat. Under annual revenue, she had listed $432,000. "That's not revenue," I whispered, tracing the number with my finger. "That's the allowance. That's the $36,000 a month I transfer to her." "She classified your personal transfers as sales income," Sarah confirmed. "She cooked the books, Claire. She presented a company funded entirely by a silent subsidy as a profitable, self-sustaining enterprise. If the conglomerate buys this, and they find out the revenue stream is actually just her sister's bank account, they will sue for millions. They will come after us for facilitation if we don't stop it now." I closed the folder. The silence in the room was heavy, pressing against my temples. For 5 years, I had told myself that Brianna was just immature. I told myself she was a dreamer who needed a safety net. I had framed her selfishness as a personality quirk, something she would grow out of, but looking at these documents, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. This wasn't immaturity. This was grand larceny. She was attempting to sell stolen property. She was fabricating financial records to defraud a multinational corporation. She wasn't just a brat. She was a criminal, and she was dangerous. If I let this sale go through, if I let her sign those final papers, she wouldn't just be ruining her own life. She would be exposing my company, my employees, and my legacy to a massive lawsuit. The grief I had been holding on to, the grief for the sister I wanted her to be, finally evaporated. It was replaced by the cold, hard clarity of a CEO protecting her assets. "She thinks she's a CEO," I said, standing up. "She thinks she's closing a deal." "The closing dinner is tonight," Sarah said. "At Vera, that vegan fusion place downtown. She invited the buyers. She thinks she's signing the final contract over dessert." I walked to the window. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I didn't see the tired sister who cleaned up messes. I saw the owner of the company Brianna was trying to sell. "She wants a CEO at that dinner," I said. "Let's give her one." I turned back to Sarah. "Get the car. And bring the original incorporation papers, the ones with my signature on them." "Are we stopping the sale?" Sarah asked. "No," I said. "We're going to clarify ownership. Brianna wanted to play business. She wanted to be a mogul. Tonight, she was going to learn the first rule of business. You can't sell what you don't own. The liability had to be neutralized, and I was the only one who could do it. I walked into Vera at 7:45 p.m. I wasn't wearing thrifted clothes this time. I was wearing a tailored black suit and heels that clicked with authority on the polished concrete floor. Sarah walked beside me, carrying the leather portfolio. Brianna was holding court at the center table. She was laughing, clinking glasses with 3 executives in expensive suits, the buyers. "And the best part," I heard her say as we approached, "is that the overhead is practically zero. It's all lean management." "Excuse me," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the conversation like a knife. Brianna looked up. Her smile froze. "Claire? What are you doing here? This is a private business dinner. You can't just crash." "Actually," I interrupted, "I'm here on business." I turned to the man at the head of the table. He looked annoyed. "Gentlemen," I said. "My name is Claire Hayes. I am the CEO and sole proprietor of Verditech Holdings, and I believe you are attempting to purchase my intellectual property." The man frowned. "I'm sorry? We're buying the Brianna lifestyle brand. Miss Hayes here is the founder." "Miss Hayes," I said, gesturing to Brianna, "is a paid consultant, nothing more." Sarah stepped forward and placed the portfolio on the table. She opened it to the incorporation documents. "These are the original trademark filings," Sarah said. "Registered to Verditech. These are the inventory purchase orders. Paid by Verditech. And this," she pointed to the last document, "is the employment contract Brianna signed 3 years ago, stating she has 0 equity in the brand." The executives picked up the papers. The silence at the table was suffocating. Brianna's face went from pale to ghostly white. "That's not true," she shrieked, standing up. "I built this. It's my face on the website." "Your face is a marketing asset," I said calmly. "An asset owned by the company. A company you are trying to sell without authorization." The lead executive looked at the papers, then at Brianna, then at me. He closed the folder. "We were told she was the sole owner," he said to me, his voice cold. "We were shown financials indicating self-sustaining revenue." "Those financials," I said, "reflect a monthly allowance transferred from my personal account. It was a subsidy, not revenue. There is no business model. There is just my bank account." Brianna looked like she was going to be sick. "You're lying. You're jealous because I'm successful." "Successful?" I asked. "Brianna, your credit cards were declined this morning. Your car was towed an hour ago. And the villa?" I paused, letting the words hang in the air. The eviction notice was posted on the door at noon. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. The illusion she had lived in for 5 years, the illusion I had paid for, was dissolving in real time. The executives stood up. They didn't look at Brianna. They looked at me. "Miss Hayes," the lead executive said, "thank you for bringing this to our attention. We will be withdrawing our offer immediately, and we will be contacting our legal team regarding the misrepresentation." They walked out. They didn't even pay for the wine. Brianna stood alone at the table. The restaurant was quiet. People were staring. "You ruined my life," she whispered. Tears were streaming down her face now, ruining her perfect makeup. "You ruined everything." "No," I said. "I stopped paying for it." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes, the panic. But for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to fix it. "Why?" she sobbed. "Why would you do this to me?" "Because you threw away the locket," I said. "You threw away the only thing that was real." I turned to leave. Sarah was waiting by the door. "Claire!" Brianna screamed after me. "Where am I supposed to go? I have nothing." I stopped. I didn't turn around. "You're self-made, remember?" I said. "Figure it out." I walked out into the cool night air. The city lights blurred around me. I took a deep breath. It tasted like freedom. The chain was gone. The promise was kept, and then broken. And now I was just me. And that was enough. The fallout was quiet, but it was absolute. There were no more parties. No more live streams. The villa was vacated within 72 hours. The Porsche was recovered by the leasing agency. Daniel filed for divorce a week later. He didn't ask for alimony. He just wanted his dignity back. He took the dog and moved into a small loft in the city. Brianna didn't fight it. I think, deep down, she was too exhausted to keep pretending. She moved into a studio apartment 40 minutes outside the city. She got a job as a barista. For the first time in her life, she was standing on her feet for 8 hours a day, earning $12 an hour plus tips. She wasn't an influencer anymore. She was just a person trying to pay rent. I didn't intervene. I didn't send a rescue check. I watched from a distance, checking the police logs to make sure she was safe. But I let her fall. I had to. You can't learn to stand up if someone is always carrying you. 6 months later, I drove to the cemetery. It was our mother's birthday. I saw a figure sitting on the grass near the headstone. I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wasn't wearing makeup. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt that looked like it had been washed 100 times. I walked up beside her. She didn't jump. She just looked up, squinting into the sun. "Hi, Claire," she said. "Hi, Brianna." She looked back at the headstone. "I brought flowers. Daisies. Mom liked those better than roses anyway." We stood in silence for a long time. The wind rustled the trees, the same way it had in Malibu. But this time, the air felt clean. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was steady. "Not about the money. I know I should be sorry about the money, and I am. But I'm sorry about the locket. I'm sorry I treated Mom's memory like it was trash just to look cool in front of people who didn't care about me." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to me. It was a personal check for $200. "It's not $36,000, she said, a small, sad smile touching her lips. "But I earned it. I picked up extra shifts. It's the first installment. I know I'll never pay it all back, but I want to try." I took the check. It felt heavier than the millions I managed at work. "I accept your apology," I said. "And I accept the check. I didn't offer to hire her. I didn't offer to buy her a condo. I let her keep her dignity by letting her face the consequences." "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Where does the money go now? The allowance?" I looked at the grave. I didn't keep it. I realized that for 5 years I was watering a weed, hoping it would turn into a rose. It never did. So I decided to plant a different garden. I pulled a brochure from my bag and handed it to her. It was for the Susan and Thomas Hayes Scholarship Fund. "The $36,000 a month now goes here," I explained. "It pays for full tuition, housing, and books for 6 underprivileged students studying environmental science. Students who have nothing but are working for everything." Brianna looked at the brochure. She ran her thumb over our parents' names. That's good," she whispered. "That's better." "It is," I said. "It's justice. Instead of fueling a lie, that money is finally building a future." We said goodbye at the gate. She walked to the bus stop. I walked to my car. Later that afternoon, I sat in the back of an auditorium and watched a young woman walk across the stage to accept the first grant. She was crying. She said this money was the only reason she didn't have to drop out. I touched the silver locket around my neck. It was polished now, shining under the stage lights. The invisible chain was gone. The burden was lifted. I wasn't the guardian of a ghost anymore. I was planting seeds in ground that would actually grow. If you believe that true love sometimes means saying no to the people who hurt us, hit that like button and share this story. And tell me in the comments, what's the one thing you're building for yourself right now? I'll see you in the next video.